Hi everyone, it's me, Sandy Cruz of Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. For years now, I've been bringing to you conversations about wellness from experts from all over the world. Whether it be suggestions in how you can age better, biohacking, alternative wellness, these are conversations to help you live your best life. I want to live a long, healthy, and vibrant life. Never mind all those stigmas that as we reach midlife and beyond, we're just going to shrivel up and die with some horrible disease. Always remember, balanced living works. I really look forward to this season. Hi everyone, welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today with me, I have a special guest. Her name is Maureen St Germain, and she's actually been on my show twice now. Check out episode 194, all about understanding your Akashic records. That was my first recording with Maureen, and today we are going to talk to you all about waking up in the fifth dimension. You've probably been seeing this a lot all over social media, fifth dimension, people who are vibrating on a different plane. We're going to break it all down for you today. And please, I'm going to ask you to share this episode with someone else who you think might really resonate with this, because that's just how we keep spreading the good, right? I'm also going to ask you to go to Apple, search Sandy K Nutrition, scroll down. You're going to have rating. I'd love for you to give me a 5-star rating. And then you're going to see a little prompt there that says write a review. If you could just write a few kind words, let me know why you find my podcast useful, helpful. That would mean the world to me, and really a few great reviews is all I need from my audience to keep bringing a new episode to you each and every week. Now, today will be my last episode until January 6th, which will be my birthday, by the way, but I'm taking December 23rd and December 30th off for the Christmas holidays. I'd love to spend a little bit of time just not thinking about podcasting for a little while. And I'm going to wish each and every one of you a beautiful Christmas holiday and a happy, happy New Year. Please follow me on all of my social media channels. You can find me everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, basically anywhere, Threads. I'm not really active on Twitter, or X as they call it. But yeah, find me anywhere. It's just Sandy K Nutrition anywhere. Now, the other thing I just wanted to announce was my Substack. Many of you who follow me know I am also a writer, and I am working on my second book. My first is actually a guide, the Essential Thyroid Guide. It is a non-clinical, simplified guide for those of you who just want to understand how your thyroid gland works, this very, very important little gland. It is available on Amazon everywhere. You can find it. It's just called the Essential Thyroid Guide. Now, my Substack is really a collection of short essays that are explorative, scientific, theoretical, spiritual articles, just to help you understand your wellness from all perspectives and explore your wellness, because I'm a big believer in bio-individuality. So go follow me there. It's Sandy Cruz, SandyKruse.substack, substack.com. All the links will be in the show notes. And now let's cut on through to this amazing interview with Maureen St Germain. And I'll see you in the new year. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today with me, I have the lovely Maureen St Germain for a second time on my podcast. Maureen has over 25 years of experience in the area of mystical and sacred traditions. Known as the practical mystic, she is a prolific teacher and facilitator of spiritual knowledge for contemporary life. As an internationally acclaimed Ascension teacher, Maureen has been granted access to a dimension that has been closed to most of humanity for eons and is a direct channel to source. She is the founder of St. Germain Mystery School and Akashic Records International. Her annual program, the Ascension Institute, is a highly sought after, immersive training for evolving humans. She was on my podcast before, episode 194, Understanding the Akashic Records. And today we will discuss the topic and her newest book, Living Your Best 3D Life. Sorry, 5D life. 5D. We are talking about 5D. Most of us live in 3D, right, Maureen? Isn't that right?
Most of us are mostly living in 5D.
Yeah. So I'm excited about today's conversation and to talk about some of the things that you're going to find in her book. So I always have to start off by asking, what's your story? How did you get to be where you are today?
I was born awake, I think. And from the time that I can remember as a young woman, a young adult, I knew that my mission was to help others. And I was pretty sure it was going to happen through books. Um, I found a cassette tape that I had made to as a incentive for people. And at the end, there's a baby crying that I pick up and start to nurse. I don't know that I ever used it, but kind of helps me grok memory wise. When did all this start to really happen? So I studied Edgar Cayce and the Cayce material when I was a teenager. And I was fortunate because my mother was psychic. Both my parents were Catholic. So we had that tradition behind us. And then, the little tiny bit into knowing things ahead of time or plugging into what people were really thinking was part of an everyday thing. Like, well, of course, if you're Indian, you always add curry powder to everything you make. It was a little bit like that. So there was no question that it was against the rules or anything. College years, I was also very plugged in, very, very plugged in. And um, at one point, I was in an environment that I was not happy about. And I remember asking my angels to help me get over it, help me get over my unhappiness. And they said, every time you think about how sad you are about this situation, give yourself two positives every single time. And so that's when I created this whole idea of two first. And so it's been like that my whole life. I did get married. I did have 4 children. They're all adults in their own homes with their own families. I worked in a corporate for a long time. I've been meditating regularly for as long as I can remember, and I've been doing the Merkaba regularly since 1994. Even though I was doing corporate, I was still doing workshops on the weekends. And because I wanted to write books, I was terrified to write books. I didn't know how I was going to do that. It wasn't like I had a literary gift that a lot of people have, where they can't not write. It wasn't like that at all. It was me. I knew I needed to write and I wanted to write, and I was terrified. So I decided that if I started teaching seminars, that would give me the material to write about. And that's what I did. I kept very good journals. I still do. And over the years, so many cool things have just opened up. But there was a lot of hardship too, financial hardship along the way, twice. these things. They help us learn who we really are, and they help us figure out our priorities. And I think that that's important. That anytime I was in a really, really tough spot, I would ask for a miracle. And I would say, I need a miracle. I need a miracle. And it would always happen. But I'd still have the terror for, a half a day or whatever. If you, our listener, are having one of those terror days, don't worry, you'll get through it. You'll get past it, and you don't have to sacrifice yourself. You do not have to sacrifice yourself. There's there's a thread of an idea it's permeated throughout history, and that is when you accept a situation that's not tenable to you, when you work in an environment that's out of alignment with your beliefs, you are compromising yourself. You're giving away some of your power. And in this world, it's all about sovereignty these days. We're all being shown get in your power, stay in your power.
Mm.
So, what that means is the willingness to jump off the ledge. And I'll tell you that one time when I was between jobs and I had been let go because of principle, things that I was doing that were not they weren't conforming with what everybody else wanted. I was never fired for performance. I always did my job well or better than what was expected. I wasn't afraid to rattle cages. And so here I am now without, I was let go. I have no money in the bank. I'd just given one of my kids $2,000 for his tuition. And I remember crying to myself, what'll I do? What'll I do? What'll I do? It was like a whine, like a chant. And from behind me, Amoria came in and said, just show up. And I think that that's really how I got where I'm at today. I just show up. It doesn't mean that I'm always right. It doesn't mean that I'm always perfect, but I know how to show up.
Very beautiful. I have some questions. Okay, I don't know what you think about this, Maureen, but there's something I call almost like a commercialization of spirituality right now. You know, where people will go, and they'll be like, oh, we need to show that we're doing something spiritual. We need to show, let's take selfies here. Let's show everybody that I'm doing something spiritual. Do you see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
okay, uh, I don't claim anything except for the fact that I am a very open person, and I am very open with the fact that I do not believe that science is all knowing. And there are so many I'm going to call them esoteric practices that can't be explained by science that contribute to our health, our wellness, our happiness, how we age, and all of these facets. And so I would love to have your explanation of what is the higher self, because you hear this term constantly, and it kind of goes with that whole commercialization of spirituality, where people are really not that spiritual, or maybe they are, but it seems, and it comes across very, the way I like to describe it is, it's just very ick to me. I don't know how to describe it. So
So,
I want to hear your opinion on all of this, on higher
okay. So,
self. Yeah.
yeah, that's why I was kind of laughing. So I will come back to the higher self because I
Okay.
think that's important to know. But I would like to comment on all of these things. That I'll call what you call the commercialization of spirituality, and there is a lot of that going on. And the one issue that people who are deeply spiritual might find problematic is the fact that I'm spiritual over here and I do all these practices, and this person is over here and they kind of look like me because they're doing some of the same things I'm doing, but they're out there on the social media. And so they're trying to do this. And initially, the reaction on this side is a very interesting ego personality thing, where if person A compares themselves to the deeply spiritual person, we'll call that D for deeply spiritual. What the deeply spiritual person feels initially is this quality of what I'm doing has been diluted by what they're saying. You see? Now, on the other side of it, and this is the part that I was laughing about, is there's this expansion of awareness, because the people who are doing social, maybe they are frivolous, maybe they're on the edge, and they're not really, as deeply. It will catch up with them, and they will become spiritual. That's the first thing, okay? And I used to say when I would teach manifestation, look, I don't care if you're here because you want to manifest $1 million or whether you're here because you want to manifest spirituality. Both will take you there because of the way this practice works. And what I know now is that we need both. And I can sum it up in a adventure that I took where I was working with a deck of cards, and it was about ascended masters, and there was a mistake in the deck, and they had the picture of one ascended master and the name of another. And I was like that first group of deep meditators. I was indignant. I was annoyed. This person's really well known, and they're putting out something that they didn't even check, right? That was my attitude. And I will admit I had an attitude about it. But I was also trying to justify my own position. Well, I'm a purist and I don't want people to make that mistake, blah, blah, blah. And so I went to the altar and I complained. And they said, relax. We both got in. She only had 24 slots and she got 25 masters in the deck. And I thought that was hilarious. It also helped me to just get over it, and look at all of it as beneficial.
I like that. I like that because it's still spreading positivity in this realm of spirituality. It's
Right,
still spreading the goodness in the world.
right.
I like that. I love that attitude because a lot of people will get really turned off by that.
I know. And see, one of the things that we talked about before we were on camera is this whole idea that the minute we get indignant, the minute we get turned off or annoyed, we're falling into the polarity trap.
Yeah.
So it's incumbent upon us to find our way through that. And it's totally okay to feel indignant and then choose to hold a higher vibe.
Mm. Mm. Because indeed, when you are feeling that way, that is the 3D world, right? That's where
Right.
ego lives. And that's where, feelings of what you're explaining would live in that area. And there's a lot of that
Right.
right
And
now.
that's us leaving the 5D world. And so now we can say, well, what is the higher self? And the higher self is a version of you that's plugged in to source, God, whatever you want to call it, the higher realms that you and I don't typically have access to. So our higher self could be likened to the version of you that might be in heaven, but that's not exactly right. Your higher self is you. And that's really important. A lot of people think of their higher self as something separate, like an angel or a guardian, and that's not so. Your higher self is you. And there's a one-way door between you and your higher self, and it's you reaching up. Your higher self is not permitted to break through the free will zone, but you, with your free will, can and may and are encouraged to go into that realm. And the higher self has access to the data that surrounds you that you might not know about. And they also have access to what you think about and what you know. So that in a sense, they've got both um, uh, linear and horizontal awareness. And what that does for you is like having the best administrative assistant you could ever ask for. He or she knows what you're into, knows what you care about, and are anticipating multiple scenarios so that when you are in that zone of whatever's going on, they can give you new data and influence it. And that's the cool thing about the higher self connection that I teach and the 100% accuracy that I claim. And that is your higher self is capable of affirming the status quo. It's also very likely, as a coordinated effort, to give you updates on the status quo. So, situation normal, new update. And what that does for you is helps you live your life. And a great scenario, and I ask for a logical reason to follow your higher self. Now, remember, you're following your higher self. You're not letting your higher self dictate. You are choosing to listen to your higher self like you would listen to a good advisor. When we do the higher self practice, we go for 4 weeks, for 45 days rather, where you only ask unimportant, insignificant questions so you can get used to what it feels like being connected to your higher self. And what's interesting is after you do your 45 days, you don't have to follow your higher self. There's no rule says you must. However, once you develop that connection, when you choose to not follow the guidance after you've asked, you usually regret it. So the joke is, yeah, go ahead and don't follow your higher self, but you'll probably only do it once because of the likelihood of realizing in those moments that your higher self is always right. And there are times that my higher self has saved my life, literally saved my life. And I think that's the number one thing that we each need to do because we're all becoming the ascended master you, the ascended master me. And what that means is that the higher self and the physical body are merging. That's never been done before. That's never occurred in all of creation. And so it's a big adventure, a big experiment, but a good one.
So why is that happening now, Maureen? Why now? You said it's
Because
never happened.
we're at the end of the Kali Yuga. We are at the end of an era. And you could also say that Source reached a point where they had enough data. Because I've always said that what is the reason for creation? If we came from Source, if all of us came from Source, and all of us were in league with Source, why would we leave? And the answer is because we wanted to grow, we wanted to expand. Source wanted to know more than it could possibly know in its present state. So you choose to create a boundary around yourself that separates you from Source, and you pretend that you're not everything so that you can rediscover everything and have all these experiences. You separate from that which is inseparable to create new data. So now here we are with a lot of data And the dramas are pretty much the same. So you go from family to family, society to society, across the board. We've had enough.
Mm.
We've had enough of pain. We've had enough of discomfort. And it's time to end the game. It's just time. The stories are the same. One of the things that a teacher said to me one time, she said, what I have found is that it's always about love, money, or family. Every question is always related to those things, or career. So if we've got enough data of humans hurting one another, it stands to reason that we're done. We've got enough, and we don't want to do that anymore.
Mm. There's been a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of that, especially as of, the last year, couple years even.
It's
Like
been
it's
really.
almost like a big upheaval of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think as we get closer to the end of that line, we're going to see a big resistance.
Mm.
Um, you know, they say the stages of grief are anger and then denial. And so they were kind of at that place of anger and denial that this world is ending. It's what we know. It's what we've known. We hear stories about children who go back to abusive parents on purpose. They prefer it. And why do they do that? Because that's what's familiar. And why do we seek that which is familiar? It goes back to this whole idea that if we came from source, that was familiar. And we're always looking for that level of connection. So the familiarity is more important than safety.
Here's a question. Okay, I have a few questions about the higher self first. Maybe we'll go there first. And then I want to get more into the whole 5D versus, 3D. Um, what is the difference between higher self and intuition? And
Mm,
second part to that is when you, I don't know the right term to use, but when you really tap into your true higher self, does that mean you're just going to be a doormat and just be like, oh, my higher self says, let it go. Who cares? Let it go. Let it go. So, kind of a two-part question, difference between intuition and higher self. And then, does higher self mean that everybody steps all over you?
hmm I understand. Um, so the difference between higher self and intuition is that your higher self is you, and your intuition is your breakthrough. It's like
Mm.
um I have this joke about what you call the person that your spouse was married to before you. And the answer is your practice spouse. So intuition is like your practice to get to your higher self. Nothing wrong
Ah,
with it. It's part of who you are. But intuition doesn't always break through. Your intuition is lower self triggering you. There's danger. You're sensing it, um, and you have awareness. And then as you break through, you might actually tap into your higher self. But the benefit of doing an actual practice that allows you to know for certain that your higher self is giving you accurate information is to go through this 45-day practice period. Now, a lot of people will say to me, well, I already have a really good connection. I don't think I need to do that. And my response is always the same. Okay, just check in. Have you, since you concluded this about yourself, have you always followed your higher self? And the answer is no. The answer is always no. Well, there's a few exceptions, almost all the time.
yeah.
And my response is, then you don't trust it. You'd like to trust it, but you don't. Because if you trusted it, you would just go with it. And that has to do with the ego and the personality. So, how do we make decisions? Most of us make decisions based on history, historical data. We check the web, we check consumer reports, we check with our friends, and so on. It's all historical data. Remember when I said that the higher self will give you up to the minute, this moment, highest and best good. So when we use our higher self, we are using real-time data. Now, getting back to intuition, intuition is the feeling around things. So feeling around things might be based on logic and good sense. You probably scheduled a day or two of R&R after your vacation so that if you came back tired, you'd have the ability to recover. Not everyone does that, but a person might do that as a way to honor the vacation and make sure that everything's cool. If your higher self came in and said, no, you need to look at your emails right away and you need to work a little bit every day until you go back full time, you would say that doesn't make any sense. I clearly got that I should schedule these days. I'm not going to blow them off and give them up to work. Your higher self says you need to show up and do this. And so that's a classic example of the difference between your intuition and your higher self. Your intuition says you should take good care of yourself. Your intuition thought to remind you to schedule time off after your vacation. And now you're being told by your higher self to go back to work. This doesn't make any sense. But you do that and you get a phenomenal email from a client, or you get an invitation to participate in something that you would aspire to join. And so opportunities are there, important information is there, something there that's of value for you. So that's why the higher self is so important. And that's why it's different than intuition. And intuition is a little bit like the baby steps to get you to connect with your higher self. And then going back to this whole idea of letting it go or, being a doormat, that just doesn't happen because your higher self will not encourage you to interact with people that would, be a doormat over you. And what happens is you're in a place of unconditional love when you're connected with your higher self. So even if, and this is really funny, even if you were around a family member and this happened to me and I was in this blissful place and she said, you're like the ice queen. And she didn't mean it in a nice way. But because I was in a state of bliss, I said to myself, she must know I was a queen in Egypt. How cool is that? And I completely stayed in my place of bliss. She couldn't touch me.
Bypassed. Ooh, I like that, Maureen.
And one time, her father, who also had a harsh tongue, said something to me like, oh, you're just like your mother. And I turned to him and said, thank you. That was one of the nicest things you've ever said to me. Now, his tone and his words were not meant to be a compliment. It was like his frustration, right? Oh, you're just like your mother. And my mother, who was nearby, leaned into me and said, I don't think that's what he meant. And I smiled at my mother and I said, I get to receive any way I choose.
Mm-hmm.
And I choose to receive it as a compliment. So part of what happens when you start spending more time in 5D, and we all are doing this, we're vacillating. It's like a sine wave, so we don't get into 5D and stay there, unfortunately. It's not like a driver's license that once you get it, you can drive. It's more like before driver's ed, where you have to have a licensed driver as your companion before you can get your license. So we slide in and out of 5D, from 3D to 5D and back. But the good news is it is a trajectory. And what that means is it's always an uphill slide. So even though we're going up and down, it's angled up. And when we go up high. When we come down, we don't come down to our previous low, but we do come down like that. And so one of the things that I like to remind people is don't get down on yourself because you can't keep your vibe high all the time. Instead, be grateful that you can keep your vibe high a lot of the time and focus on that. And so it changes the thing. So when you are in 5D, if there's someone in your life that's continually, treating you like a doormat, calling, let's say it's your mom and she's calling up, so well, you have to do this and you have to do this for me. I can't do this and I can't do that. What happens is two things. You're able to anticipate what she needs before she needs it. So this you have to do for me becomes less oppressive because you're already on it. Oh yeah, I took care of that.
Mhm.
I'm bringing it over today. So there's joy.
Yeah.
I got you. I got you covered. And so this whole doormat thing just slides away. And especially if your vibe is such that you're intending to positively influence those around you, they're not even going to try to walk on you. Or when they do, it turns out to be funny rather than oppressive. And that's the other thing that I've discovered in 5D. Everything is funny. Everything is funny. No matter what is happening, everything is funny.
So I want to touch on this whole intuition thing because I know exactly what you're talking about. How it's like you and I have touched on this before about using pendulums and how emotion can come into play and alter. I mean, I'm a big fan of pendulums, but I understand because of my conversations with you from last year that there are limitations to using
Exactly.
the pendulum. And
Right.
it's not the same as tapping into your higher self to get the
Mhm.
answers.
Right. And because I say there's nothing wrong with using the pendulum, a lot of people use it, and I recommend that people, if they want to use their pendulum, they would use it for therapies for themselves, supplements for themselves,
Yes, yes,
those kinds of things that are directly affecting your field.
yes.
But when it comes to the whole field of you interacting with life, or you are interacting with your world, your higher self has got the goods, so much more so
Yeah.
than reading just your immediate energy. And that's one of the benefits of using your higher self.
And
It's a little bit like we're putting on the costume of the higher self. It's a time of year where people put costumes on. And so you're putting on the costume of the higher self. And if you do it every day, pretty soon you are your higher self. And I don't know what pretty soon means, but you get my drift.
so, okay, I love how you describe that because that's actually exactly how I use my pendulums is specifically for me. And is this supplement good for me? Is this good for me right now? Even my thyroid medication, because I don't have a thyroid gland. So I will test different thyroid medication because even though it's pharmaceutical, I also know that I don't have the gland. So I need something to help me. So I will test certain things with my pendulum. But oh my gosh, I've tested exactly what you taught me last year and tried to use the pendulum outside of my own, I guess you
Narrow.
could say my
Yeah.
own controllables. And
Mhm.
a lot of the time it was wrong. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, Maureen was right about this. I need
Yeah.
to do the work with the higher self to really get in touch with that broader aspect, I would say, of knowingness. Does that make
Well,
sense?
and I don't know if I told a story about the 10-year-old who was very precocious, and her mother was one of my students, and the three of us were at dinner one day, and she whipped the daughter whips out a pendulum, and she's my new toy, and she's all excited. She said, I can show you how it works. It's so accurate, blah, blah, blah. And I start messing with the pendulum. Now, I'm not touching it physically. I'm just moving it through my
Oh,
mind.
wow.
And the daughter looks at me and says, that's so strange. It always shows, this answer for this food or something like that. And I looked at her and I said, well, there's a reason for that. And she said, what? And I said, I'm controlling your pendulum. I'm making it do that. And, her mouth dropped. Why would you do such a thing? And I said, because I want you to know that your higher self is more powerful than your pendulum and it is more accurate than your pendulum. And that even though the pendulum might give you good information, your higher self connection is the deal, is the deal.
Is the higher self where you access your Akashic records?
No,
Because you
higher
know.
self is 50 and above. And the Akashic records are housed in the 11th dimension. And housed is a very loose word here because it's all vibration. It's not physical location the way you and I think of a physical location. So it's a vibration. Think about this. A radio could be an AM radio, or it could be AM and FM, or it could be AM, FM, and satellite, like what
Okay.
a lot of us have in our cars. So we have three choices. Each one has their own bandwidth. So when you look at the higher self, that bandwidth is finely tuned. And like Russian dolls, when you're in 5D or you're at the higher bandwidth, you can see and participate in 3D. But when you're in 3D, you can't do higher until you move yourself there. So when we're stuck in poor me or frustration or annoyance, whatever it is, our fear stuff, it's nearly impossible to slide into 5D. But when we're in gratitude and joy and we're appreciative of whatever the situation is, even if it's something we don't like, but it's teaching us something, we move into 5D and we stay in that state of true bliss. And that allows us then to align with our divine self. When we align with our divine self, we're actually tuning out the game of 3D and installing the game of 5D. And it's just like when everybody had Windows 95, when they changed it, everybody screamed and cried, but it was an improvement. So everybody took it on. And so you can stay stuck in Windows 95, but at a certain point down the road, the company says, well, we're not going to update that anymore. We're not going to service it anymore. So little by little, there's these little glitches that turn up and you end up looking around saying, okay, fine, I'll upgrade. I'll do 2000. I'll do Windows 2000. And so we as a humanity, as a society, are doing the same. We are becoming fifth dimensional. Everybody's going to be fifth dimensional, whether they were planning on it or not. At some level, they agreed that they wanted to do that. Otherwise, they wouldn't be an embodiment at this time. And at the same time, we're tempted to be like the man in the Matrix who screamed, just put me back in that pod. All I want is my steak. And I don't know if you ever saw the first Matrix movie, but the whole idea was that there were all these pods where people were in some kind of liquid and their energy was being milked from them and they were in a simulation. So they weren't actually having these experiences. They were all simulated. And when the man was pulled out of the Matrix, he didn't like it. It was too unfamiliar. And he wanted to go back to what was familiar, even though he knew he didn't have the free will choice that he could have. It's very interesting how we're given challenges like you have been given in order to recognize that we can do better. And the thing that I know about the higher self is if we're all becoming fifth dimensional, that means each and every one of us are becoming our fifth dimensional self, which is the higher self, which means our knowing of source, our knowing of God is going to be much greater than what it was. And in so doing, we can bust out of the matrix that we're stuck in. And we are stuck in a matrix. It takes a great deal of spiritual attainment to step out of the matrix because everyone is being bombarded with the energies of forget and reject. There's two primary messages coming over Wi-Fi, the cell phones, all of it. And when we unhook from that, we have the capacity to connect with nature. And when we connect with nature, we tap into the vibe of who we really are. And everything flows and we become more connected with our divine self. This was proven to me one year when I took a week or 2 week vacation in a national park. And it was in one of the national parks in the Northwest. And they didn't have cell service. And I was so surprised to see how much they were spraying the skies. Beautiful blue skies. And then early in the morning, there'd be all these crisscross things like apple pie crust, lattice. And then right before lunch, there was this stuff. And at the evening hour, and I started asking my guides. And they explained to me, well, if people aren't on their cell phones because they don't have Wi-Fi, they're off the grid for a week, and then they're plugged into nature because they're hiking and enjoying the beautiful scenery, they'll wake up. And so if the powers that be don't want us to wake up, then they cover the skies with various chemicals that will dumb us down again.
I think what you're saying is when we level up, we can
Then we're not affected by it.
yeah, we can get past it, right? So I have
Yeah.
to tell you,
And it's almost like, how shall I explain this? It's a little bit like when you're in 8th grade, everything's important. But when you're a junior in high school, what you really care about is doing well this year so you can do well next year and get into the college you want. So there's a different MO.
yeah, you have a different goal in mind. So the stuff that was down here doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly.
Okay, I have not spoken about this at all to anybody except for my husband, who he was with me on my trip. I mentioned to you that my trip was very spiritual. Before my trip, I was getting so many signs because, like you, and I mean, I'm not saying I'm as evolved, but like I'm just saying I've always been a very spiritual person, but I ask for signs all the time, whenever, whether it's during times of trouble or sometimes I just feel like I can talk to my aunt or, who's not with me. So I was getting a lot of signs that I specifically see them as signs from my aunt who has passed. Then when I was in Europe, there were multiple signs while I was there. So one was, I'm like, oh gosh, look at this tree. How gorgeous is this tree? I didn't notice. And then after the photo was taken, it was as though an elder was looking down on me. There was a face in the tree, Maureen.
Nice.
And then my husband and I went to Westminster Abbey. That's what it's called. It was in London where,
London.
yeah, very spiritual place. And he's not really into this really spiritual side of any of it. And he's like, oh my gosh. He goes, I didn't want to say anything to you until we left. But a couple of times I was watching you walking and it was like a haze over your head. And I was like, oh, interesting. And then, I had some very emotional moments going back to my aunt's, where she was buried. And then I came home and I got COVID. And then I was still walking every day in nature and I was asking for signs from my aunt and nothing. And I was like, is it because I don't need the signs anymore? Is it because I'm sick and I'm clouded? Is it because, like, I didn't understand, Maureen, because I'm like, I would always get signs when I asked for them. And so I just had to share that story with you because I see these like maybe that was, a bit of a step up. Maybe it was like we were talking about a recalibration, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Um, I think your two primary answers are accurate. So the first one is you're sick and you're a little bit clouded. And secondly, you don't need the signs because you've got so many, and you needed to integrate the signs you already did have, you know. And I don't know what kind of picture you had of yourself in the tree,
Oh, I got to
but
show it to you.
this is me looking at a tree that I could see an elemental in.
Wow.
Okay. And when you're in a holy place, this is um, the temple that, or the chapel, not chapel, church that was built in Mexico City after the visitation of the Divine Feminine, and she's called the Virgin of Guadalupe. And even the church is loaded with orbs.
Oh,
You see.
wow. So
So
interesting.
yeah. And it's so interesting that those pictures are on my desk, today.
I'm gonna
So
have to show the picture to you, Maureen.
yeah,
Like
I would
I
love to
I
see it.
I don't know how I can show this. How can I show? Because it would probably be
On your
interesting.
camera. If it's on your camera, what you do is you bring it up on your camera. So you kind of
Yeah, it's in my
you
camera. It's in my photos.
do you have an iPhone where everything's connected?
Yeah, yeah. I bet you I
Well,
could
you can
share
send it
this.
to me. If it's on your phone, you can send it to me in chat, and then I can show it on the screen because I know how to make that happen very quickly. Or I can try and tell you how to do it. But
Okay, I
I
think I
want.
figured it out. Do you see it?
Yes, I do.
Do you see the face?
Yep.
So that was at
Yep.
St. James Park in Buckingham Palace, at Buckingham Palace. And I'm like, I just thought the tree was cool. I had no idea. I mean, you can see my hand there. And then somebody who follows me was like, do you not see that? That's your elder. That's one of your elders. I
Hmm.
thought, wow, that's kind of cool.
It's
Anyway,
very cool.
I thought it was
Very.
neat. Might as well share that, right? Now I have to figure out how to unshare it.
Just close. Just close. Yeah. There you
There we
go.
go. We're
Yeah.
back. But it was so special after. But while I was in the moment, I had no idea. I'm like, honey, look at this tree. It's so big. Take a picture of me. So I think
Mm-hmm.
moments like that, when you notice, it's like you take note after and you see it
Mm-hmm.
after, and then you're like, that means something.
Mm-hmm. Um, so going back to the absence of experience of signs that you were looking for when you were, healing. And I'm going to say that this is you stepping into your true power and your ability. Now do it yourself. It's like when
Mm.
the eagle pushes the babe out of the nest, the eagle has to fly. And so you're at that place in the moment of being okay with the information you have so far and accepting it about yourself and about your experiences. It's wonderful.
Mhm. Thank you for that. I do feel like there was a chapter that was closed, finally. It's like that
Ah,
closure had to happen. I never went back when my aunt passed away. I never went back to Croatia. I never went to her funeral. It was like a part of me needed that closure in order to move forward. So I truly feel that, deep within.
nice. Very nice.
So let's move on to I have a question about what you had said about how everyone's going to be living in 5D.
Hmm.
So does that mean there's no good and bad? There's no evil? There's no, like, what does that mean if everyone's living in 5D?
That's a good question. And you're right. There is polarity, hot and cold, up and down, but there is the absence of evil, the absence of the not God choice. So the not God choice means that you don't step on other people's toes inadvertently or on purpose. It just doesn't occur to you. And that's the difference between 3D and 5D. The negative stuff doesn't occur to you. And the outside influences have been eradicated. So we don't have that. It's like if you build a house in at the edge of a jungle, you're going to have mosquitoes. But at some point, you're going to get rid of all the mosquitoes, and the house is going to be sealed, and it's just the absence of mosquitoes. And so it's hard for people to comprehend. You still will have choice. You still will be in a free will zone, but all of your choices will be pleasing to you and to everyone you're interacting with. But it does mean that there's going to be even a bigger burst of creativity than before because we don't have anything to hold us back now. See, we had brakes on us a lot of the time, and now we won't have that. So the creativity is just going to flow out of us. And, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago when I was living in New York City, I went around one day and asked everybody that I shopped with, well, if you had suddenly won the lottery and you had so much money you didn't have to work, would you still come to work?
Mm.
Over half the people said yes. And I would always ask why. And the primary answer was because I like people. I like to work. I like that I'm making a difference. Even the coffee shop people. It was very cool. I was surprised. I didn't expect that. So many people who are in jobs, excuse me, that they don't like, drudgery type jobs, they tend to, say, well, if I had all the money in the world, I wouldn't work. I wouldn't show up here. But
Yeah,
I think they would show up somewhere.
that's a good point. They would show up somewhere. I thought about that many times. That very question. I'm like, would I still podcast? 100%. Would I still be writing about health and wellness options? 100%. I would still
Yeah.
be doing what I do now. There's no question
Mm-hmm.
in my
It's very
mind.
exciting. And that makes it easy then for you to be sliding into 5D and staying there because you're not looking to change the vehicle that you are using to do your work. You're just willing to keep evolving. And that's what's important.
So here's another question. You know how you were talking about 5D, how you kind of go up and you can tap into
Like,
that and then you come back down, but
mhm.
you'll never go down. Is that what the world will be like when everybody's in 5D? They'll kind of go up a little and then down, or is it just everyone's going to
I
be in
think,
5D?
I think we're in transition right now. I always saw it as a 40-year event, and we're in the middle. So lots and lots of people are 5D all the time. And you can tell because they're in a good mood all the time, or they're always kind. Um, even in New York City, there's a big shift. After 9/11, there was a big shift of kindness. And more recently, there is a huge shift in kindness. And I'll give you a tiny example. I was walking down the subway when I was visiting one time recently, and my scarf came off my coat, and I didn't notice that it had slid off. And I was, 10, 20 steps away from it, and somebody saw it, grabbed it, and came running up to me and gave it to me. In the old days, that wouldn't have happened. People would have
Mm,
just kept walking, or somebody would have picked it up and tucked it in their purse.
yeah. Yeah.
So I know for certain that we are already becoming 5D, but that's not the end of the road. There's a whole nother world that we are working with and breaking free from. And as we all become fifth dimensional, we will no longer be held back by the constraints of rage, of jealousy, of anger, of judgment of others or of ourselves. Instead, we will, have you ever made something, maybe something crafty or something in your kitchen and it came out so well, you're kind of pleased with yourself. You don't stop. You want to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let me do that again. That came out really well. And so there's this quality of 5D that will inspire us in a different way than the way we've been inspired in the past, which is fear, you know, to be pushed to do something because of fear.
It's really important that we talk about how do we start that journey into 5D. I know that you provide numerous meditations in your book. Is this the only way, like through meditation? So I'll give you an example. I have a lot of different tools that I use for meditation, for visualization. I feel like I do believe that some people, it just comes easier to meditate. Whereas other people, they'll be meditating and they'll be like, am I meditating? I don't know. And like, the brain just keeps going,
Yeah,
right?
or did I feed the dog this morning,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all that
So
jazz.
exactly. So this is why I use tools to get my brain to just chill out.
Mhm.
So I would love to hear your thoughts on how we can start trying to tap into this 5D.
Well, I resonate with your experiences because I too have what I call monkey mind. And I think it's a function of people who are very cerebral. They just tend to be busy at the mental body all the time. And the mental body's kind of gotten stronger. If you're always lifting a baby, your arm's going to be stronger. And the arm you hold the baby in is going to get stronger than the one that doesn't. So it's a natural function that if you're using your brain all the time and you tend to be cerebral, that it's going to continue to diminish the other part of you. So, like you, I use guided meditations to get there. At the same time, I think there's a huge value in silent meditation, no words. And that's a little tougher for a lot of people like you and I. So that's why the guided meditations will take you to that place where you can have silence. It's far easier to do a guided meditation and at the end stay in silence than it would be if you didn't have that guided meditation to slow you down and to get you thinking about these spiritual topics or these spiritual ideas. It just helps you to focus on that. So one of the tools that I share with people is that when you go to bed at night, announce yourself, I'm waking up in 5D. I'm
Mm.
waking up in 5D. So you announce it. I'm waking up in 5D. And there's a whole bedtime prayer that I've updated in the new book, um, Living Your Best 5D Life. And that's very useful. If you say it often enough, you might have it memorized. Excuse me. And in fact, it may be important that you say it out loud if you can. It is important to say it out loud if you can. Another tool is to do the phrase, I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I come in contact with and everyone I'm in contract with. And heaven on earth is the equivalent of 5D. Heaven on earth is the equivalent of being in your ascended body. So when you announce, I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I come in contact with and everyone I'm in contract with, it literally elevates the whole harbor that you hold. And so all the ships go up with you.
So I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of this relates to intention, right? Like you have these powerful prayers, meditation, and it's all about intention. So I've done this before where I'm sure you've probably done this, where you go to bed and you say, I really want to remember my dreams when I wake up. and you put that intention there before bed, and more often than not, you will remember them. It's would that make sense to you, Maureen? That all of
Absolutely.
these,
Because
yeah?
our plans do create the reality we live in.
Mm,
Um, I want to go circle back a little bit. You made a statement earlier or something about how important is meditation? Is there any other way? And
mm,
I want to say that there are many ways to become fifth dimensional. However, meditation is the one way that anybody can use, readily available in this reality, that will help them become fifth dimensional faster than if they don't do that. So the number one tool is going to be meditation. And that's true across the board. And the reason for that is we have a very advanced society of tools, equipment, computers, and so on. And our technology has raced ahead of our spirituality. So we're out of balance. So we definitely need to quiet the mental body, quiet the racing thoughts in order to open up that opportunity to hear what the stillness will give us.
mm,
So, yeah, meditation is pretty important. And if we urged our people to do one thing, as a listener, what's the one thing you can or should do? I would say the prayer, I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth for everybody. And then after you've gotten in the habit of doing that, then find a little window of time. And that's why I made the app so that people could choose a 5-minute app or a 30-minute app. There's no excuse anymore. You scroll through it and find something that matches either what your mood is or what you're thinking about, or do it randomly. But it's a free app, and it's downloadable on both iTunes and the um, Google Play Store. So there's really no reason why a person couldn't start there. And if you want the subscription version, then there's like over 30, and we're adding probably 10 more this fall. So it's going to continue to grow. And it's really lovely to have this on your phone. And if you have an iPhone, you don't even have to connect it to the web when you're using your data, because they allow a certain amount of data on your iPhone.
mhm. I have it.
Um,
I have it since you started it I think it was last year, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
last spring, late
Yeah.
spring, early summer.
Yes. I have it.
Meditation is done many ways with many opportunities. There's one kind of meditation called silent meditation, and that's practiced in a program called Vipassana. And in Vipassana, you actually go to an ashram for 10 days and you meditate for 10 hours every day. Food is minimal, and you have an expectation of finding your true core, finding your silence. And it isn't easy, but after a few days, all that other stuff just kind of fades away and you really do get to your core. And one of my sons chose to do this, and he was in his early 20s, maybe 21. And he did it on a Christmas break. So right after Christmas, he went off for this Vipassana. And I said to him later, "What do you think you gained from doing this?" And he said, "Well, it's not something I want to ever do again. But I learned that the core of life is always worth living." And I thought, what a great message to teach yourself at that time. So, if you can't meditate one way, do another. And if you don't like guided meditations, then you need to learn to silence your brain. And uh, if you can't silence your brain, try guided meditations, because you're going to find that they will calm you down and create space so that you can be in your center and in that silence.
I love that. I think that's a great way to wrap things up This has been a beautiful conversation. I could continue because maybe we're going to have to do a part two because I have lots of questions about the angels and spirit guides and all of that. So I will be in touch because I think people have a lot of questions about that. And you referred to one of the angels right at the beginning of your
El
story.
Moria, Ascended Master El Moria. Yeah, just show up. That one.
Yes.
Mhm.
So
That's
I
an
think,
ascent.
yeah. So what's the difference? We're going to have to do another recording for sure
Okay.
because you are an absolute wealth of information. And I think that, it's beautiful that we have you as a guide to show us a way that is, I think, a happier and better way than a lot of us live day to day. So let us know where we can find you and maybe if anything that we didn't touch on that you want to touch on.
So I would like to encourage you to get our book, the latest one, Living Your Best 5D Life. It's the third in a
I have
series.
it too.
Uh, Third in a series on 5D. So you want to read all of them: Waking Up in 5D, Mastering Your 5D Self, and Living Your Best 5D Life. I can be found on my website, stgermainmysteryschool.com. The books are all available at regular bookstores like Barnes and Nobles. It's available on Amazon and Inner Traditions and my website. So, you can get the books anywhere. We have a lot of tools for people that you can use to help you heal your emotional stuff with the essential oil blends. We have training classes that we've created online so that you can study with me at your own pace. Um, we have a very extensive Merkaba training, and that you can take also online. And you can do a long version or a short version. The long version just has a lot of supplemental tools because as a mystic, I continue to build explanations and understanding so people can really grasp it. It's like somebody says, I love German cars and the quality of German craftsmanship. And it's a little bit like that. Once you get into the place where you recognize how important this part of your life is, you're not going to want to abandon it. You're going to want to come back. And so we have these tools, the classes, the live courses, and the books and meditations to help you get there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I'm going to add to that what you just said. It's like you never really reach the summit. You just can keep expanding and keep growing. And I know that because I feel like you've just got so many tools to help others do that because it doesn't end. You don't reach the peak and then you're like, I'm done.
Doesn't work that way.
No, it's even in health. Trust me on that one. It's like we're always changing, evolving, and need to learn something new. So I love that you provide those tools. Thank you so, so much, Maureen. I loved connecting with you again today. And I really am excited to bring this conversation to my audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to share it with someone you know might benefit. And always remember, when you rate, review, subscribe, you help to support my content and help me to keep going and bringing these conversations to you each and every week. Join me next week for a new topic, new guest, new exciting conversations to help you live your best life.